Hello and good evening. Welcome to the Baltimore WordPress Meetup, and tonight's topic is Google Business Profile. The Baltimore WordPress Meetup will have video and links available on YouTube approximately 2 weeks after the meetup. If you want to speed that process up, you can sponsor the meetup. Links that are sent in the Zoom chat during the meetup will be available with the recording, and they will be included at the very end of the video. So if you are looking for links that are talked about, please make sure to check the end of the video. The Baltimore WordPress Meetup is an informational meetup. Please use the information, products, and services that we show at your own risk. Just because we show a website, plugin, theme, or anything else is not an official WordPress endorsement of that. Make sure to keep it family friendly. Most of us are attending from home. We will do our best to follow the WordPress Meetup community standards. This means that if you break these rules, you will be booted from the meetup. No spamming or spammer-like behavior. We have people of all skill levels and backgrounds, so no judgment for people who are at a different level than where we are at. And generally, don't be a jerk. Some sponsor thank yous before we get to our main meetup. Anfira LLC helps companies serious about their WordPress development needs. They specialize in helping agencies and businesses that are frustrated by their WordPress challenges. If you need help, visit anfira.com/help. I will drop this into the chat. Our next sponsor to thank is Easy Alley Guide. The Easy Alley Guide works to make web accessibility easier to implement through done-for-you tools and processes. For more information on web accessibility, including tools, tutorials, and more, please visit easyalleyguide.com. And our final sponsor to thank is OB Digital Consulting. OB Digital Consulting sponsors our video recordings and prepares them for YouTube. Without the sponsorship of OB, you would not be receiving the YouTube Meetup recordings. Contact them for assistance with video production. And now to the questions. So we did not receive any pre-submissions, so we will just go ahead and give Tricia Clements the floor to discuss Google
Sure.
Business.
Great. Thank you so much for having me, Jen. I appreciate it. I'm Tricia Clements with YourBizWatchdog, and I help businesses with their Google Business Profile. I help through Google Business Profile Management. I also have fix-it services for businesses that find themselves, their profiles in trouble one way or another, and also offer white label services for agencies. So tonight, basically answering your questions about Google Business Profile. So please drop your questions into the chat so that we can take a look and answer some of your specific questions. I will go through while we're waiting on some questions and just talk about a few things. Going on with Google Business Profile, there's always something new going on. So first off, a couple of things that since this is a WordPress meetup group that I like to talk about is that your Google Business Profile and your website do work hand in hand. And just to back up one moment, your Google Business Profile, basically, that is where you're logging in at a business.google.com for your profile and contains your business information and where you also find your reviews online. And I will pop that link there where you find your business's reviews. You update your information on there, and is really for local businesses and local SEO. If your business services a specific local geographic area, you definitely need to have a Google Business Profile so that you can use it to work to get traffic to your website and to get more customers. It's really instrumental for local businesses. So back to originally, I was mentioning your Google Business Profile and your website do work hand in hand together. So with that, you really need to make sure that that basically they got the same information, your business name, what you do when you go to your website, that you've got the same information there that you're telling Google on your profile. And also having, if you've got, let's say you're a business that has several locations throughout an area, having separate pages for each of those locations will then tell Google those locations on the map. So if you've got a location in one city of the area, let's see, this is the Baltimore meetup in one part of town, and you're going to link that Google business profile to that specific page on your website about that specific location. And then if you've got other locations, you're going to have those other location pages. So those are really important, especially if you've got multiple locations that you want to have those so that Google knows where you're doing business. And also for some different things on technical SEO, you want to have lots of things on your making sure you've got your city in there. That's the big part about local SEO, the city and your keywords, what you're doing. Make sure you have those in your title tags. If you can get some in some H1s here and there, but making sure your title tags and metadata have that information that Google knows, the keywords and where you're located. Having that specific geo location information in there is really important and lets Google know that that's the area that you service your clients in. And you all, please don't be shy. Let me know what questions you have, because I really want to help answer questions specifically, because I will tell you, when I work with clients, like I mentioned, I have my Fix-It services. A lot of times each individual question that businesses have, each one can be so different as far as the getting that answered and specifically how to work through those different items that they have. But I will go through a few things as far as what I've seen lately. I've noticed a lot of times when businesses, they'll get their profile suspended from Google will suspend a profile. You've got two different types of suspensions. You've got what's called a hard suspension and then what's called a soft suspension. So the soft suspension is basically your profile is suspended. Google will send you an email, and you can see your business profile on the map live, even if you're when you're not logged in. Like visitors and consumers can see it on the map. However, when you go to your business dashboard at business.google.com, any changes you make there are not going to be live on the map. So let's say you have someone that leaves you a review and you really want to respond to that review. If you respond to it, it's not going to be live on the map. So that is a soft suspension. The next kind is a hard suspension, where Google basically takes your profile off of the map completely live. So you can log into your dashboard and see it and it'll show suspended. But if somebody goes in and searches for your business, they're not going to find it there on the map. So again, that can be extremely important for your business, because a lot of local businesses get huge amount of traffic and customers from their Google business profile. I talked to one client the other day, and he reached out to me. He was having problems with his profile. He had gotten it suspended quite a while before he reached out to me, and he said that his business, as soon as it was suspended, a hard suspension, he lost 50% of his traffic right then and there. So you can see from that how important your Google business profile is. As far as what causes a suspension, there are quite a few different things as far as what the top items are. I would say kind of a catch-all is basically a violation of guidelines. And I do want to put a link for Google Business Profile Guidelines, kind of an overview. And I will put that for you in the chat. So as far as why profiles get suspended, there's so many different reasons, but catch-all is a violation of Google guidelines. Some of the things are updating your core business information. Google has 5 things that they look at for your profile that they consider core information: your business name, your business address, your website, your primary category, your phone number. So if you go in and change any of those things, you are at a higher risk for suspension. So let's say you're going in and rebranding your business and you're changing your business name and your website address. That has a much higher risk of suspension. So you've got to go in there and do it. There's a whole order of doing it, and making sure that Google is going to accept it, because you could get it suspended. That's not the end of the world as long as you have all of your documentation together to send to Google so that Google knows, yes, you are who you say you are and you did go through this rebranding. So anytime you make any changes on those top five core items, you are at a little bit higher risk for suspension. So you just need to be aware of that. And also having information in there in those top five items that's incorrect, that is different from every place online, that could trigger a suspension because Google sees all of these other places online. Because sometimes people think, well, it's just my Google business profile, but Google looks at everything online. If they're finding a lot of information that is not the same and doesn't match, Google might trigger a suspension where they want to check and have you show them that you've got the correct information and are providing customers with the correct business information. Another thing that can trigger a suspension is going into your profile and just like making a ton of changes all at the same time. So don't sit there and just go bam, 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 and go through all the different things that you need to update like all at once. If you're updating things, update it, let it take and make sure that it's accepted before you go in and make the next change. Sometimes I have seen profiles when you make too many changes all at once, they will get suspended. Another thing is as you've probably seen out there that profiles can get reported by other users online. So having someone report your profile, that could, not always, could result in a suspension. And then another big reason for suspension, I always like to say, is simply breathing wrong on it. Sometimes there's nothing you did wrong. Your profile is just open up and Google suspends it. So just making sure that you've got all of your business documentation in order is a good thing to make sure that you've got done, so that if anything does happen, that you're able to provide Google with your business documentation and get your business back online, reinstated, whether it was a soft suspension or hard suspension. So just making sure that you have all that stuff together for your business. And anyone, I didn't have a lot really prepared. I will definitely go through some more information that I have for you all, but please let me know specific questions about your Google business profile. Since this is a Q&A, want to answer some questions that you have. Let's see.
And of course, you can just toss just a question mark into the chat if you want to speak your question.
Yes, definitely. I know how typing them in, especially with Google, they can be long, difficult questions.
Here we
We
go.
do have a question. Good. Okay. Let's see. How does one set up a Google business profile for an online business? Okay, so first off, make sure you can look at the link that I put in for the guidelines overview and take a look at that for eligible businesses. So it depends on specifically what you mean by online business. So Google says big businesses that are online only are ineligible. Now, does that mean that the business you're talking about is not, I'll repost that link for you, is not eligible? It does not necessarily mean that. And this might be something, so tell me what type of business you're talking about. So, and I say that because a lot of businesses, they may work from home, and just because you work from home, it doesn't necessarily mean you're online only. So e-commerce only, like if you're just shipping stuff out and you're just an e-commerce store, that typically is not eligible. And so online sports education business videos, I would say chances are it's probably not eligible. What Google wants to see, so there are what's called, you've got brick and mortar, which is the storefront you go into, and then you've got what Google calls service area businesses, and you might see it listed as SAB, service area business. Those are ones where the business goes to the customer. A lot of those, think of like your home
Like a
service.
plumber.
Plumbers, your landscapers, your dog pet sitter, well, pet sitters, things like that. But then you also have businesses like, for example, me
Web designers?
online. I'm sorry.
Web designers?
Web design, exactly. Web design. I'm not a web designer, but yes, web designers, online marketing. So, for example, my primary service is in my location, but I do service people across the U.S. However, I have a local area that I'm at, and I have to be able to service those customers either out in the local community. Either I go to them or we meet at a local designated area. That has to be an option for you to be able to have a valid Google business profile, that in-person local meeting, because remember that your Google business profile is a big part of what's called local SEO, and it's that whole local factor. It's based on the Google map. And so this is one key thing. So for example, if you are your business is local there, let's say in Baltimore, Google wants you can set your service area business. And when you do that, it's going to say, well, what areas do you service? When you do that from the address that you input, even though it's hidden, you need to have it around no more than 2-hour drive. Now, some cities, it can be different. 2 hours depends on the time of day. So it's just kind of a best guesstimate. But the thing is, so even though you may have customers, let's say, all the way in California, you're not going to set your service area to California, because that could cause a suspension, because your Google business profile, even though you as a business can service people in California, it wants your local service area. So you do offer summer camps. Are they in-person summer camps? I take it that they are. Let's see. We're yes, on
Yes,
a
on a
ball
ball
field.
field.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
so that is local in person. Let me see. Sports education business videos. So that is something that you do in person. Locally. So yes, that part of it would make that that business eligible. I would go in and make sure when you have your, let me see. Okay, so I'm looking back to your original question, because I went off on a few explanations on some things. So setting up the profile. So one of the main things is you're going to do is when you're putting your address in, you're going to put your address in and then hide it from the map. Now, the key is that I've seen a lot of times is what address you're going to put in for your business. And that's really important, because it could cause problems in the future. It may be immediate, it may be a year from now, 5 years from now, or you may never have a problem. It could have caused an issue. So I like to set things up correctly from the beginning, so that you don't have issues in the future. So the address is going to be basically your business. If you have a corporation, a LLC, or whatever type of businesses you have, typically your address that you would give the Secretary of State would probably be your home address. So whatever that address is, it's on those documents that you have, and it cannot be things like a UPS store, a co-working space. There are a few exceptions to that. Virtual office, you can't use things like that. It wants to have where you do your daily operations. You could put that address in and then click to hide it from the map. Now, Google does have that address and knows what that is. And it does base that address off of where your service area, because the map is a lot of times it's based on distance when people are searching, whether Google shows your profile or not. That's one of the things that it does look to show when it shows up. Those. Okay, so virtual office for mailing address. So that is one thing Google does says is against the guidelines, is having a virtual office for your mailing address for your Google business profile. Having said that, if you use a virtual business profile in your Google business profile, you have a much higher chance of suspension and then not being able to get it reinstated until you get a different address. Now, the other part of that is that Google wants to see that address on other documentation, not just in your Google business profile. And by that, not necessarily live anywhere else online other than like your city and state. But for example, your things like your the Secretary of State I mentioned, utility bills, things like that, different business, what other type of information that you have for your business, it wants to see that address, and they do not want it to be a virtual office. So that's one thing that I do see a lot of businesses that are service area businesses have a problem with. They do try to use virtual offices, co-working spaces, and UPS stores, and those are ones that I see get into trouble with Google as far as trying to maintain that profile.
So
Um,
we had another question
yes,
coming about looks like how to raise my Google profile, which I think means improve it or raise the rankings on like Google Maps.
sure,
So
sure,
what strategies would you use to improve
sure.
the ranking on Google Maps, for example?
Yeah, so that there are a lot of different things and that you can do. The first thing I would say is completely fill out your profile. Make sure you've got everything filled out and done completely. And making sure that you've looked at your services and that you're working on your services. The other thing is taking a look at your website. And even though we are talking about your Google business profile, like I said earlier, what your website says does have an impact on your Google business profile and ranking. So
So
making sure,
even if you don't have multiple locations, have you
correct.
seen people
Yes.
have better results by making like a dedicated page that's just about that location and the services you offer?
Especially, yes, especially if, like, let's say you service the entire US, but then you want to focus on that specific area, having a page that focuses on that specific area, the things that you offer in that area, specifically, yes, that can definitely help. And the other thing is, if you're doing that specific page that's really geared to the location, is then making sure that that page is what you're putting in as your website on your Google business profile. Um, and so let's take a look back. So we're talking about two different types of businesses. So the first thing would be, let's take landscaper. So typically the home page is going to have all that information. It's going to be specific to the geographic location, the city that you're in. It's going to talk about that because you're going to be able to look at that homepage and see what they do and where they do it. So at that point, you're going to then use the homepage on the Google business profile. But let's say you're a web designer and you have clients all over the US, but you're based in Baltimore. So I would recommend you've got your website, adding a specific page for Baltimore and really talking about some things in the Baltimore area and your services there, and then use that for your Google business profile. You are the main URL on your Google business profile. So does that help?
And so once you've got everything set up and everything's filled in, are there any particular things that you've seen that kind of help give you a little bump?
Yeah, definitely. Working with your services and going through those, keeping those up to date. One thing to note is that Google will scrape your website. They will scrape all other websites online, and Google will update your Google business profile without you being aware of it and just go in and update it. And so you need to kind of keep up with that and make sure that that they haven't updated it for something that you don't do, or they haven't removed something that you do actually do. One example is had a client that does carpet cleaning. And on their website, they mentioned, moving the furniture to clean the carpets. Next thing you know, Google has a service they provide is furniture moving. I'm like, no, Google, they don't. That's not their service. They do that when they do carpet cleaning. So checking and making sure, looking at those services and keeping those up to date. That's one of the biggest things that can help with that.
So would you recommend actually like periodically taking kind of a snapshot and kind of archiving for yourself what your Google page says in case they go in there and make a change so that you have a
Uh,
baseline?
I I typically don't do that, but one of the things is like Google will have on their when you log in there, it'll say when you click on your services, it'll tell you in what in there has been changed. So you'll kind of see, and if you do, you can go in and reject it or accept it. And if you don't do one after a time, it will automatically change, but you don't get emails about that. So I don't know that really keeping a snapshot is really necessary. The main thing is to make sure you're going in. I would say at least weekly, sometimes more often, to go in and just and check those and make sure that nothing has been changed. The other thing is not just your services, but other things on Google can be changed by other users, where you've seen on there suggest and edit, and users can suggest changes. And if you don't go in and reject it and see it and reject it, Google can say, okay, we'll accept it. So making sure that all of those changes are, if there's anything that is incorrect, that you go in and reject. I'm trying to think if and the one thing about it is Google is always changing things. So keeping up with the different things that are new. For example, not too long ago, you could, I want to say it was in the last 6 months, I could be a little bit off, you can add links to different social media profiles. And that's been shown to come up, links and information to your profiles. So go in and complete that, fill that information out. So just so you went, though you went in and when you set your profile up, you went through everything and it's all correct and you've added everything, next week there could be something new. They're always making sure you've got your attributes in there correct. Google is always adding new things. Some of that is dependent on what specific primary category you
Can you
choose.
tell us what an attribute is?
Yes. So for example, if you've seen on a Google business profile where it says women owned, that would be an attribute where somebody has gone in and told Google that this business is a female business. There are other things for, let's say, brick and mortar, where locations where it will say wheelchair accessible, or bathroom is wheelchair accessible, things like that in your profile. Also, whether or not you have online appointments. So if you end up changing your primary category, those specific what's available to you is going to change, will probably possibly change. So I could go into 5 different profiles and look at the attributes that are available to them. Each one could be different based on the primary category. And what they are today could be different than what's available next week, because Google will add different things in over time. It's always changing. That's one thing you can count on with Google, is that it always changes. There will always be new things, and they're always working on new stuff. So again, once you've set your profile up and completed it, you still have to go back in and make sure that there's nothing new that you should fill out to help your profile. Another important thing is getting reviews. We all know how important those reviews are. Making sure you've got something consistent in place. If you're a newer business and you don't have many reviews, I'll tell you that one thing is that when you get your 10th review, you'll see a boost in your rankings with that, getting that 10th review. And then from there, you'll see another one once you hit 100. So, if you're like at 7 or 8 reviews, work to make sure you get that 10th review, and then continue getting reviews, but really kind of focus on them. Reviews can really help bump a business. That's one thing that that definitely you can see improvement on. Make sure that you are compliant with Google guidelines. Do not incentivize in any way reviews, and by incentivize, I mean whether it's money or there was one business back over the
Raffle
years.
drawings. I've
No
seen some
raffle
businesses
drawings.
try and say, for each Google review, you get an entry in a raffle drawing.
Yes, those are against guidelines. And here's the thing: I've had somebody say, "Well, how is Google going to know?" I don't know, but let's say somebody, a competitor, sees it and
They take a photo
takes a
of it.
picture and sends it in. You just don't know, and so
That's
personally,
also an FCC violation
Yeah.
as well if it's
Oh,
not disclosed.
so, are you, FTC? Yes, it definitely is. And that's the part. So Google doesn't allow incentivized reviews. The FTC says you have to disclose it. Well, so, if you're working with on Google reviews, you're not allowed to have incentivized, so you can't go in and say, "Oh, I was incentivized," because that violates Google. And then if you don't mention it, you're in violation of FTC.
Yep.
Another thing is when you're looking at your website, the FTC does have information as far as showcasing reviews on your site. Gosh, it was last year, I think it was last year, over a year ago, that they sued a business because they were showcasing reviews, but it looked like they had all 5-star reviews. But when you went to their the actual place they were getting the reviews, and I can't remember if they were Google or not, but it was like a 2.1 or something like that. So it was a huge discrepancy in what they were showcasing on their website versus when you actually go to the review site. And the FTC had big problems with that. So definitely, if you're showcasing reviews, make sure that you're following FTC guidelines as well. It's not
And
just
so
Google.
basically getting a proper sample, not a highly selective sample.
Yes, and then also, let's say you having a terms of service in regards to your reviews is important. So let's just, for example, say you're pulling your reviews from your Google Business Profile, and there's one that says something that maybe is, let's say, deemed profanity or something like that. And let's say, for example, Google, for some reason, has not taken it down. You can go in and not showcase that on your website, but you need to have in your terms and services that you will filter out things like that. So, because they don't want you to really pick and choose what you should.
Unless it's a toss violation.
Exactly.
So Mark put up a question in the chat
Mhm.
looking for top 2 or 3 things to check that have the biggest effect
Okay.
on, I'm assuming, your rankings, and
Yes.
how often should you be updating your profile?
So well, go first to how often. Honestly, it really depends on the business and the location. So I would look, and also the competitors, at least checking things once a week, usually more than once a week, if Google's having lots of updates. For example, I mentioned, the different changes they could have in your services, making sure that that's correct. Any other changes on your profile. Someone could go in and recommend a different website address for your business. And for whatever reason, Google might accept it. You definitely want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So, I would say at the minimum weekly. I like to do it more often than that. Now, as far as some of the things with the biggest effect, I would say working on reviews, getting those reviews, look at your competition. So what do their reviews look like? Do they have more than you, or do you have more than them? And consistently getting more new reviews, making sure you've got a review system in place for that. That would be one of the first places. The other thing is checking and making sure that your primary category is the most optimal for your business. You can have up to 10 categories for your profile. The primary category is the most important. So let's say you do numerous different related services. Definitely put those in as secondary categories, but make sure that your primary category, make sure that that is the best one for your business. Look at what the competition's doing, what's coming up, and see if that's the best for you. So those are 2 things. Looking and seeing, what's going on with the competition. Because one thing I will say, it can change depending on where you are and what vertical, what specifically your business does, as far as the things you really need to look at. Another thing that can be important is that when you're looking at the searches, the proximity of the person searching to where your business is is important, because there a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times Google will show some of the closer ones. It also, there are a lot of different factors in there, but that is one important factor, is how close you are to the searcher, and also how close the business is to what's called the centroid of the city. So for example, where your primary customers. This is one thing I've seen businesses actually move their location based on where they wanted to come up in the search results and where their customers are, moving to a more prime location to where their business would show up more. That can impact a business, and it can also, and this is one thing that some businesses aren't aware of, your address, it can impact it even if your address is hidden on the map. Because remember, I said Google does know what your address is. So if somebody is searching for your business, even if your address is hidden, Google knows your address and how close you are to them. So let's say you're in Baltimore, and you're a service area business, but you're really on the outskirts of town, way 20 miles out, but you want to get your customers across town, you're going to have a much harder time with that address, because Google does take in proximity to the location a lot. So sometimes it makes a difference to change locations. And that can be for brick and mortar, changing your business, if it makes it worth it. Some businesses have found that, based on the fact that they're going to get so much more business, it's worth the cost to move. Service area businesses can be a little bit different. You've got your primary address, but then, let's say if you want to rent a space that people do not come into on a daily basis, and use that address that's closer to where your customers in the center of the city, wherever it is that you want to get customers from. I've seen businesses do that and definitely improve their ranking and coming up in results. And there are tons and tons of other things. I will share a link for the local ranking factors. It's something that's done every year. And you can, I may share the screen while I have this up, Jen, so I can show a couple of different things. So let's see, we were just talking about, so these are the local ranking factors, and again, local businesses, local SEO. And I'm going to scroll up really quick and show you your Google business profile, on-page signals, your on-site SEO reviews, links, other different things. But let me scroll down and show. So they do these ranking factors, and one of is that rank number 1 importance is your primary category that you choose. Number 2, keywords in the business name. So that's what GBP business title, that's your business name on Google, having keywords in there. So I'll tell you, this unfortunately does make a difference. So for example, I'm YourBizWatchdog. Let's say a keyword would be local SEO. If I wanted to change it to YourBizWatchdog local SEO, in order to properly do that with Google, I would need to change my LLC and all my other documentation to get it right. If you don't change your other documentation, you do have a risk of a suspended profile and chance of losing the profile. So if you're looking at doing that, consider everything. It's not something I'm interested in and would look at doing, but if there is a highly competitive area, like for example, attorney is one that's like really, really competitive. Having a keyword in the business name can really make a difference for some businesses like that. And it might be worth it to do. And that would be considered a full rebranding. You need to rebrand your business name and not just change it on Google, because you could definitely have issues with the profile. Let's see. Another number 3 on the list, proximity of address to the point of search, basically the person searching. The physical address is in the city of search. So remember, I was saying, even if you're like in Baltimore, but your actual address for your location, even if it's hidden, is just outside, it can make it harder for you to be found on the map. So, and let's see, we went over a dedicated page for different services, linking across your website. So these are things that you can do for your website as well. Those are some good things to take a look at. And then conversion factor. One thing, rankings are important, but conversions are really, really important. That's where you're going to get your clients from. If you look at the top 10, 8 of the top 10 have to do with reviews. So having those reviews, having a consistent review system in place could really help your business. Okay. Any questions? Anything that you need clarification or questions on for that?
No, I think that makes sense. Do we have any more questions? You can toss a question mark into the chat if you'd like to speak your question.
One thing I mentioned, and not sure, I didn't go into a lot of detail on, are what I kind of consider supporting documentation. Those are things that when I work with my clients, I recommend that they have set up and together, and before I even start working with their profile. And these are things that that Google is going to need if you get your profile in trouble. And one of the things that I do for that is because I look at it and I say, we want to work on your business in the long run. And so let's not, before we spend a bunch of time, effort, money, whatever, working on the profile, let's get some things in place ahead of time so that if there are ever any issues that come up, whether it was something, get your profile suspended and it's nothing you did wrong and you need to get it resolved. Either way, you need to get it resolved so your business is back on the map. So those supporting documents are things that that I work with clients and making sure that they're correct. Again, I mentioned the Secretary of State, getting that together, utility bills, things like your business bank statement, your insurance. Every specific municipality may have something different as far as, are you required to get different licenses to do business there? Having that information handy and complete and correct can be really important for a business if you get your profile in trouble with Google, having to present that information to Google. In the last couple of months, Google has rolled out a new reinstatement process. So if you've gotten a profile suspended, having problems, and you need to reinstate it, it's changed quite a bit. Instead of being able to email back and forth, Google, like let's say you sent them documents and they still say, no, we don't approve of that. Sorry what that noise was, hope you didn't hear it. And if you email back and forth Google, and that's what it used to be, now you fill out a form, you send them your documentation, and that's kind of it. They're going to say yes or no. There are other ways you could probably look at going in and contacting Google, but it's not the back and forth email like it used to be. So that's why having that documentation up front and done is really important. There is one part of the process when Google says, okay, let us know, give us your information. There's a specific part of that when you click and say, I'm ready. Don't click that button unless you are really ready, because there's like a 60-minute window. And if you don't upload the correct information there during that 60 minutes, then Google does not consider it. It basically, what you upload in that 60 minutes is what Google looks at. And out of all the businesses I've reviewed their documentation on, I will tell you, I've not come across one that has had that information correct on the first go. So basically that means it takes them time to get that information together. I've got one that I'm working with. They came to me, their profile is suspended, and getting that information together, they've spent over a month getting that information together, and the profile is not on the map. So that having that done ahead of time can really help. While there's not an issue, getting your supporting documentation together ahead of time can really save headaches. Sometimes I know businesses are like, oh, why do I need to get this together? But you're really saving yourself what could be a huge headache in the future, and making sure you've got it documented, and having the time to update it and correct it if you need to.
I'm
Yes.
looking at my Google business profile thing on Google right now, and it says there's a thing called messages, which I
Mhm.
haven't used before. Can you tell me what that is and who it's good for and who it's bad for?
So messages, yes, and it's kind of like a chat in your Google Business profile. If you've got that on, then you've got your messaging turned on in your profile. And basically, there's an option to have it if you're logged in on your phone, where it will come in through your maps on your phone, and you can respond right there. You can also reply to it through the email that you get. The one thing that's important, you can turn this on or off for your business in your business.google.com. And if you are not going to be responsive, I would recommend turning it off. And by responsive, Google wants you to respond within 24 hours. If you don't respond within 24 hours, Google takes that as a non-answer. And sometimes on your chat, it will show you how responsive you are. Like, this business responds 70% of the time. So that where some people might say, oh, well, those 30%, they just don't respond. No, they could have responded 2 days after it came in. So that's something to look at on your profile. If you've got it turned on, make sure you're responding to those.
So do you notice that that is good for some businesses or it's just junk for other businesses?
It depends, and a lot of it depends on the business. And kind of some businesses can kind of tell. You can also test it if you've got it turned off and you want to turn it on to see if you get people chatting with you, and leave it on and see what happens. You definitely can. Some businesses notice that their customers will use that feature in chat, but you've got to be able to respond to it right then and there. I have seen businesses get spam through there. Unfortunately, you can get spam. There's a way to mark it as spam. Um, but definitely, if it's spam, make sure you go in as soon as you can, mark it as spam, so that
Mhm.
Google knows. And if that's all you're getting is spam, you might want to turn it off. Maybe it means that for your specific
Yeah.
business, it's not a good thing to have on.
So for me, I had deleted my phone number from my Google business profile because it was nothing but people trying to advertise Google services to me.
Yes, don't you love that?
Another thing I see on here is Q&A.
Yes, your Q&A, those are things that I recommend making sure all of your questions on there do have answers on them for your Q&A, but you can also seed your Q&A into that. What I recommend is if you've got a Q&A on your website to go ahead and add some of those in there into your Q&A for your Google Business profile. If you don't have any on your website, I recommend that you come up with some to add to your Google Business profile, but then also add to your website. And one thing is, if you've already got them on there and you've got them on one page, that's fine. But I do recommend having this Q&A kind of throughout your website. For example, if you've got a specific service page and that question is related to that specific service, have that question and answer there on that service page. Because that's where they're going to have the question when they're on that service page. But definitely use that feature on the Google Business profile as well.
All right. And then there's this thing called updates, like add an update.
Those are Google Posts, and those are things that you can add to showcase on your profile. Anything that you've got, services that you want to showcase and talk about, whatever it is that you've got, you can also just promoting different things about your business. I definitely recommend using that on there. They've got things that are offers. So for example, if you've got a specific offer that you've got for clients short term, you can go in there and you can also put an end date for it and send people to the specific site that talks about that offer. So yes, definitely use the posts, or what Google calls them.
All right. Well, I think that should pretty much wrap us up for the evening, unless there's anything else you wanted to add.
Let's see. No, I think that is pretty much it. The main thing I definitely want to let y'all know is to get together kind of your supporting documentation, make sure you've got your business information together, and take a look at the guidelines and make sure you're compliant with Google guidelines. And if you have any questions, reach out to me. I'm going to put my email in, Tricia at YourBizWatchdog.com. I will put that in for you all to the chat.
Great. All right, I am just going to quick share our ending slides. If you need help outside of Meetup times, we have a webpage which has some information on it. So you can visit that webpage and see what kind of options are available to you. Our next Meetup is scheduled for April 11th. That's 1 month from now at 7 p.m. and it is going to be an Ask Me Anything. You bring the questions, I try to answer them all. And then after that, we have a meetup on May 2nd, and that is at 11 a.m. Eastern. And that will be how to quickly audit your website for accessibility. And thank you so much, Tricia, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.